Hello there, welcome to Guitar Building with Glibas. Today we are doing the fretwork. Okay, so there are probably a lot of little specific things about fretwork, but let's tackle all of that one by one. I have my 24 stainless steel frets. I used to be working with nickel frets before. This is first time I'm working with stainless steel frets, and yeah, so we have them here. Let's put them aside for now. First thing first, we need to make sure that our fret slots are in pristine shape and they're ready to accept the frets. So first thing that I would like to do, I would like to take my saw, which is not a fretting saw. It's something I would need to buy in future, but this suits the purpose. It has the width of 0.6 millimeters, the same as our fret tangs, so it works fine. And I want to make sure that every fret is at the correct depth. So to do that, I'm simply taking my saw and I'm putting it inside one of the fret cavities and then making sure that the fret depth is almost the same as my saw. As you know, this happened to be the case that my saw is the correct depth of a fret tang. So this obviously has a radius, so I'm rotating it as I go, and I now have to check for every single fret that across the whole depth I have the consistent kind of depth that I need for my frets. Yeah, just like that. So I'm rotating it, checking that every fret is deep, trying to stay straight, cut it where it needs to be cut. For example, here it's not as deep as it needs to be, and so on. So I just have to do it with all the frets. With that done, now I'm doing one more preparation step. I'm taking a small triangular file and I essentially need to run this file along the groove. Not too much, just a little bit. And this tiny groove that we're creating, or a tiny chamfer on each side of the fret slot, will ensure that when we put the fret in, it will locate the hole very easily and will go in very easily. And then in future, if in case someone wants to change these frets, which I highly doubt, but even if they want to do it, this will prevent some potential tear out. Okay, so with that done, frets will have no trouble at all locating our holes. Okay, now we can safely say it's time to hammer in the frets. I have my frets laid out here. Well, obviously I ordered them, didn't make it myself, but if you were to make them yourself, you would radius them to a slightly tighter radius than your fretboard, then cut off the tangs off the sides, so that you don't have these kind of things hanging from there. So let's start from the first fret. I have two hammers here. So this is like more of a usual fretting hammer, and this is one I purchased recently for other kind of job, but I have it here in case it will be useful. So as I'll start with the first fret, then again it can very easily locate our hole like so. Make sure it's in the correct position. I can even kind of press it with my fingers a little bit, so we obviously have support underneath our neck, which is very important. So we'll hammer it on the sides, so this side and now this side here. So we'll start from the sides. And then as as we are going, we'll start hammering in the middle, so their things will kind of spread and sit right in the fretboard. Okay, so first fret is done. Now it's essentially the same thing, just with 23 more frets. And you will notice that this will be kind of the theme of today's video, doing the same thing 24 times or 48 times, or whatever amount of, or 96 times. So yeah, this will be the theme. Now let me hammer all these frets in the fast motion. Okay, at this point we kind of have an electric guitar neck with the frets. Isn't this amazing? There is obviously some touch up to do. I'm going to check if every fret is flush with the fretboard, if it's deep enough, probably banging a few more times, and then we'll go into refining these frets. Here is little something that I thought might be worth sharing. So instead of going in with a hammer, say hammer was the initial thing, now I have this interesting tool. So you've probably seen stuff like this before in a professional setup, maybe. This is just my DIY thing. So there is a radius fret press tool, and I have a piece of wood, and then I have my clamp, and then I have this fret protection. So I'm taking it to some kind of a fret, and then just using the clamp to have the even pressure on the whole thing. So just like that, I'm ensuring that the fret receives the even pressure from all sides, and that it is right in place. And I can see that it actually makes things quite significantly better. If before there was even a very thin line, it disappears. So I'm just doing this for every fret. So usually the next procedure would be to start shaping the frets, but I don't really want to do it. I don't want to put any pressure on them just yet. I want to solidify them in place. And some people put some wood glue while they are fretting the frets, and then wiping off the excess glue off the fretboard, or some are using super glue and it's all over the place, and it's a real pain in the ass to clear. Now I want to do something which is interesting. I tried this on my previous guitar and it worked rather well. I have my super glue here, or CA glue. I have my CA glue here, and I'm going to inject it in the slots, and the slots are a tiny bit deeper than they actually need to be for the tanks. So there is a little groove where the super glue can travel, and what I want is this super glue to fill in the space underneath the fret and solidify this joint that we have here. So I will start, I'll put in the little adapter inside there, and then super glue, you can go on, and then inject the super glue in there. So for one thing, it is solidifying everything there, and for another, it's also going to cover the ends of the frets. So usually enough is when it starts coming out on the other side, when it traveled the whole way. So I'm still going to put in a few more drops. Alright, to the next step. Now you see here the frets are a bit too long and we want them to be flush with the fretboard. To tackle this, I have this very nice tool. It's just basically a file that is inserted into a radius block, 16-inch radius, that is perfect for our job. So now I'm going to very simply take it and essentially run it along the frets, along the whole length of the fretboard, like so, and remove these ends. It is pretty loud, but hey, that's going to look nice. So let me fast forward this. It's not fun, you know, we're just going to do it. That's it. So as you have probably seen, what worked best for me actually was taking a file and removing the bulk of material with it, one fret by one, and only then going in with this specialist tool and chamfering the edges of the frets. Now, how do you know when to stop? Let me cover that very briefly. So as you might see, I was removing the fret ends, and you see the light side here, so the light part of the maple fretboard actually started to touch the wood, and I'm starting to get a bit of chamfer here, which is exactly what I want. Now the thing is, I want this chamfer to be consistent along the whole length. And what happens with the fretboard, say you run this thing like so and like so, for whichever reason the middle gets the most chamfer and the sides get the least chamfer. Here also there is a concentration of frets here, so it's a bit harder to cut. So what I will be doing now, I will be going, you know, a bit more here, you know, a bit more here, and then ensuring that this chamfer on the end of the fretboard is consistent along the whole length. It's great to have it because it makes it easier to play, and of course I want it on both sides. So it's not that fun of a process, it's just me going back and forth and ensuring that things look right. Finally, to induce even more consistency, I'm going to introduce some leveling beam to these frets and the fretboard. We still have a bit of bulges of super glue here on the side when we were, you know, from the time when we were filling the slots, so it will help to remove those. And also I will run it at an angle like so to ensure once again the consistency of the chamfer that we put in. Probably have to unclamp it in order to tackle the side of the fretboard. so I have to be very careful here as to not to remove much material of the heel here, which we will glue in relatively soon actually. So I'm not inducing much pressure at all, so just enough to remove the excess super glue. Okay, so what we have here is a very nicely chamfered fretboard and the thread ends filled with super glue. Let me get you in here a bit closer. I apologize for the shaking which might happen because of the tripod, but here we go. Focus, camera, come on. I really need you to focus. Okay, so a bit of tiny holes here and there. So here is a really good example. So this one and this one here, they need a bit more super glue. And then check out this nice chamfer on the side as well. It's great. And you know, even though I didn't dress the ends of the threads, you know, finger doesn't really get stuck on there that often. So that is all good. I just have to repeat the process on the other side now. And so we were forced to get indoors because of the weather conditions really, but that's not an issue. We can go on. So with the sides of the threads sorted out and the little cavities left with glue, you know, they're filled with glue now, all good is there. We can now proceed to leveling the threads. We have an awesome leveling beam to do that. But the first step that I already did, but you know, if you are to level the frets, you have to have a notched straight edge that fits your guitar scale, and then you need to make sure that your neck is 100% straight, that it is dead on. You know, if there is just a little deviation, that's fine, but you know, dead straight, that's what you want to make sure. So yeah, that's achieved with adjusting the truss rod, obviously right here. I already did all that. So now I'm going to mask off the fretboard. You know, some experienced people don't do that, but you know, I still prefer to mask off the fretboard just to be safe, not to damage this pristine, you know, fine sanded fretboard. So let me do that. Alright, with the fretboard masked off and the neck straight, we can actually begin the process of leveling the frets. To do so, we will need a Sharpie or a permanent marker, and we are going to very quickly go over each fret. This black line will act as an indicator of the height of the fret and will allow us to ensure the uniform height of the frets, which is the process of leveling the frets. Alright, with the marker in place, we can now take our leveling beam. I have some sandpaper on it. I'm not sure which grade it is. I think it was initially 80, but I used it quite a bit, so it's like 120 or 240 now. But you know, it's still working. And we are, you know, it's a matter of running the leveling beam across the tops of the frets. The sanding beam, the leveling beam is pretty heavy, so we don't want to apply any pressure almost at all when we're doing it, because we don't want to bend the neck, because otherwise what's the point of leveling the frets to the bent neck. So be very cautious, applying no pressure almost at all. We are going to level it. So let's see what the situation is looking like. So we are taking quite a lot of material in the middle, while we're almost taking none of the sides. So this means that for us, the frets in the middle are really, really high. And I want to do one, I want to go across the whole layer. So as we are doing it, we can look at our marker and see what the situation is like. So in some places we are taking up quite some material, but still here on the 23rd and 24th fret, we're kind of still zeroed out. It's still full marker. So I'll continue to do that. When this looks like there is no more marker left, it means our frets are leveled. Now we want to be double checking this or triple checking. For this, we have this nice specialty tool, a fret rocker. You're probably familiar with it. Has 4 sides, and essentially, you put it along the frets and rock it back and forth. If there is no movement, like here, pretty much, it means that our frets are leveled. So no movement here. I wish I could show you an example of bad frets. I probably should have done it before we level them, but essentially if this does, this kind of rocking motion, it means our frets are not leveled. And here we are checking, each 3 frets against each other. Okay, when it becomes too long and it starts covering 4 frets, we're flipping it over and using another side here. Which is actually, okay, here's an example. I'm not sure if you can hear it. There is a bit of rocking here actually. It feels like this fret is a bit too high. So I'm going to mark this as kind of point of interest. And now, all according to my findings, I'm going to do a bit more of leveling, putting an emphasis on the frets with issues, but obviously going across the whole thing. On to the next step, which is crowning. The name doesn't say for itself. Essentially what crowning means is by leveling the frets, we're leaving them flat on the top. Hopefully you can see. And the area which the string would touch, if the player would play it, would be this wide, meaning we have bad intonation. We don't want that. We want this area where the string touches the fret to be really, really thin. Not like human hair thin, but as thin as you can get it. So what we are going to do, and I'm giving you example of a bunch of frets. I obviously have to do this process on all 24 of them. I'm going to cover them in a black permanent marker, like so. Then we'll select, for example, this fret, which you can clearly see, and then we are going to take our fret crowning file. It has different profiles, and I'm just going to take the widest one because I have pretty wide frets. So we are going to run it like so along the fret. I'm not sure if you can see, but I think you can see that the line is getting thinner and thinner. And the goal is for this line to be really, really thin. So that is exactly what I'm doing here. Oops. Okay, just like that, if you compare the top of this thread or this thread, very wide, with the top of this thread, very narrow. I think let me move you even like that. So hopefully you can see the difference we are making. We are going from this wide line to this very thin line right here. And we have to do it for all 24 of them. Every single thread here. So I'll get to work and see you on the other side. With all the threads very nicely crowned, we can proceed on to the next step, which is the thread ends. Yes, this is something that if you ever picked up a very cheap guitar, you notice the very sharp fret ends. And this is what we have here right now, but this is not a cheap guitar, so that's why we are going to tackle it. I have a wonderful tool here by Fret Guru, so same guys who did the leveling beam. That is a fret and dressing file. It is an awesome tool. It's a very special one. So you see it's grounded down here. On this side it's flat, and this side is flat as well, although here it's beveled. So flat with beveled sides, and then here we have our rasp. Maybe from this side you can see the way this works. So what this thing does, the flat surface allows us not to damage the fretboard while we are dressing the sides. And there are two ways to do it. One way would be very fast, which is, 80% of the work you can do it this way. You're just doing like 1, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, and then the other side, like 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, just like that. Then you flip from the flat side to the one with bevels, and you can go at a slight angle, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, and then the other side, 1, 2, 1, 2, 2, and this does like 80% of the job, literally. So just this, and then I would not just focus on 3 frets, I would do the same thing on all of them, and I could stop there. Though I want to spend a bit more time with this guitar, because I'm planning this to be like, the best I can do as of now. So I'm going to spend a bit more time, dressing the fret ends like so. Very carefully. So in the end, what we want to get is like nice, maybe not round, but somewhat round fret ends. Alright, now how do I make a transition so that you don't notice that actually not a whole month has passed since I was filming last time? but as if it's just going on. Probably there is no way. So what happened is the weather got really cold, and so essentially I was not doing much for a while, but now I'm back here to do some things. And what we stopped last time at, I finished leveling and crowning the frets, and now it's on to polishing. I have this nice tool here, fret rubbers. They're amazing, and with the help of these fret rubbers we are going to make sure that our frets are nice and polished. There are several grids here, so this is 180, 400, 1000, 1500 and up to 2000. I use this one a little bit just to check it out. Works very well. I think I forgot to film how I was sanding it, so essentially first I went over with like 220 grit sandpaper along the sides, and then I'm switching to this fret rubber and we're polishing them. There are several ways. You could go just like that, and that is a legitimate way to do it. Go over the tops, and then I was planning to go over the sides like so, but that is all very much of a repetitive process. So I will be doing all this, but just wanted to give you heads up on this amazing tool that I got recently, fret rubbers. And yeah, guitar building is all about sanding and polishing. I think the biggest part of it, not necessarily the favorite one, or actually the least favorite one for me and for many other people, but yeah, let me polish it up. And so I went through all the grids, and honestly, I'm very surprised. I'm not sure if you can see it on camera, but these frets, they're so shiny. Like, you can see the reflections of my fingers there, right? They're so shiny. And in my previous build, in case you watch it, I used a rotary tool and some polishing compound to get this result, but these rubbers, they are so hassle-free, they are so nice. The only thing I'm not happy with them is that I didn't buy them before, but that's not a negative thing. They're amazing. And by the way, if in case you're wondering what they smell like, imagine like a bag of sweets, all sorts of sweets or candies. If you're from US, so a bag of candies or a bag of sweets, this is what they smell like. Interesting, right? And so on that happy note, I'm going to wrap it up for today. I'm not sure how long this video turned out, because I started filming like a month ago, and then I went on and on, because of the bad weather. And as you might have noticed, I don't have a workshop, so I'm really forced into whatever weather conditions are coming around. It's winter now, so yeah, it's it's very changeable here in Korea. One day it's like minus 10 degrees, today is 10 above zero, so it's very changeable. It's impossible to predict it, but I'm happy that I got this done. It was kind of frustrating that I stopped at this point and then the weather got bad, and yeah, I was in a pretty bad mood because of all this. But now that I'm done with it and the frets are really nice, wow, I can see myself. We will move on to the next things. I still have to kind of think what is the most logical thing to do as the next step, but let's see. So thank you for being here, and see you next time.